All right, looks like we are live. Welcome, everybody, to Standing for Truth. I am your host, Donnie. On Standing for Truth, we focus on the truth of biblical creation. And tonight, we have Professor David McQueen and George Bond, Team SFT's very own Batman and Robin. They are here tonight to dismantle old Earth creation and confirm young Earth creation. Gentlemen, Batman, Robin, thanks for being here tonight, gentlemen.
We are glad to be here from the Bat Cave. We have light when the light goes out. We like the light of the truth of the gospel, but we've got other lights.
Well, just a warning to everyone in the chat. If you ever feel like you're driving with the GPS and you're driving to the cemetery, just be wary because it'll probably say you have reached your final destination. Don't be worried. Don't be worried, okay?
It is your final destination.
Yeah.
Tonight,
gentlemen, I'll introduce the topic. Tonight, we're going to be discussing Earth's magnetic field. We're going to be dedicating an entire show to it. So please, to the audience, tag me with your questions. This is going to be a ton of fun. It's an incredibly important topic. Now, real quick, I do want to remind everybody that next Tuesday, we've got the big main event. Matt Slick taking on Dr. Shabir Ali. Is God one or three divine persons? They are going to be debating the Trinity. So definitely share that around. That's going to be an epic debate. When it comes to our other upcoming shows, check the event section on our website, standingfortruthministries.com, and the upcoming live stream section on the YouTube channel. So that being said, David, George, brothers, I'm going to hand it over to you to introduce the topic in a little more detail and get this party started.
Okay, let's notice my T-shirt here. Many of you will recognize the comic book character, the Punisher. So we're going to punish the evolutionary community tonight. And the way we're going to do it is I have a 5-minute intro and George has a 5-minute intro. And then I'm going to give 20 minutes on the basic physics involving the magnetic field. And when I finish with it, you'll see that the data supports a Earth's magnetic field that's tens of thousands of years old. Thousands of years old. And then I'll turn it over to George and he will do his 5 minutes, and then we'll go 20 minutes. And then the final 20 minutes of the hour, we want to open it up for Q&A. We want to have fun with our Batman and Robin theme. Ms. McQueen will be joining us next month as Catwoman. We're all looking forward to that. At least I am. And so let's go ahead and kick this off. There are certain themes that I've introduced you to in this class that I want to return to. Now, for those of you that are in the evolutionary community, I hope I've got enough crayons to be able to make this as simple as I can for you guys. But one thing you need to keep in mind that as we talk about this, we have to keep in mind that the Bible provides us with a framework of several thousand years. Without the permission of my granddaughter, I took her toy puzzle, and I've got a couple of pieces here of her puzzle that I can ask George some questions about. When you put a puzzle together, George, what's really the most important part of the puzzle? It's the picture on the front of the box, right? That's how you know to put this together. Now, we're arguing that to understand the Earth's magnetic field and to also understand the magnetic reversal of the field during the Great Flood, you've got to understand what the Bible says to be able to put the pieces of the puzzle together. Now, you can say that very simply, or you can go to the vocabulary of the German theologians back in the time of Bible criticism. And these German theologians would say to the group, well, Genesis chapter 1 is a Weltanschauung. That means a philosophical view of what the world is. It's not what the old German theologians would call a Weltbild, an actual presentation of how the world is put together. Now, Ms. McQueen helped me with doing research, and I love this quote she found for me. Albert Einstein called the generation of the Earth's magnetic field one of the greatest what? Mysteries of physics. It's a mystery of physics. Now, can I go to my cell phone and find out all the answers? Well, I can find one model on here, but what we're going to do is we're going to turn the cell phone off so we don't get interference during this presentation. And we're going to lead up to a number of things. The second hour, we're going to look at this map of North America and Europe and the fact that since World War II, we've clearly known that there's a mid-ocean ridge. What would those red marks be? Could they be basalts? We'll find out. George, I'll turn it over to your introduction, my friend.
Okay, thanks, David. Mine's a bit longer than yours, but I'll just start off by saying that I'm sure everyone's watched sci-fi movies and the concept of a force field, but did you know that the Earth has its own force field? It's called the magnetic field. Without it, well, all life would fry, really, because there'd be nothing to protect us from cosmic rays emitted from our sun. I thought this was a great sort of subject to talk about because I recall listening to Dr. McMurtry about 2, maybe 3 weeks ago on the SFT channel, and he spoke briefly about the magnetic field. So I actually want to play a small snippet of that particular one where he was actually talking with Donnie about the importance of the magnetic field, and in his opinion, he considers that as the best evidence for young Earth. So, Amen. Donnie, I'll share the screen, please, and just bear with me while I
no problem.
System audio. So you've got to check
now,
that.
We're going to go deeper and deeper into the back cave. We may need some auxiliary light.
How about that? Can you see that?
Yes, looks good, brother. Looks good.
All right, I'll start to play it.
Down towards a lot. And you can clearly see the erosion, alluvial product at the base of the ridge on the opposite side, on the east side, the Jordan side. And when you look at it, you suddenly realize there's only enough material that has eroded there for at most a few thousand years. There's not enough material for it to have eroded for millions. If there were, the ridge wouldn't be there.
That's a great response. And so, like you said, we would have to be here all day, probably for the next week, going over all the overwhelming lines of evidence suggesting a young Earth and overturning an old Earth. The magnetic field, the decay of the magnetic field, I completely agree with you. That is a fantastic line of evidence supporting a young Earth. I've heard some evolutionists, some uniformitarians try and rescue the old Earth by saying, well, maybe the Earth's magnetic field have gone through reversals, and maybe it's not, exponential decay, these types of rescue devices. What are your thoughts about those, Dr. Gravy?
You're living in a fool's paradise. Let's think about this for just a second. First, I'll start off with a great truth, and then we'll attack the question directly, okay? First of all, I don't care what you find in science that disproves evolution, particularly things that are linear, say. They will say, oh, no, it's curvilinear. And then when you find something that refutes evolution that's curvilinear, they'll say, oh, no, it's straight line. that is a great truth. It comes from Dr. Grady's 101 Great Scientific Truths. Now, when we apply that to the decay of the magnetic field, even evolutionists will agree, because they have to, it's fact. We can measure the decay of the Earth's magnetic field as it is occurring today. Everybody agrees it's going down in strength. Everybody agrees it was stronger in the past. It'll be weaker in the future. That's fact, and they deal with it. However, they realize that if it decays to zero, it proves them wrong. So what do? They invent a fairy tale for adults. And they say, well, yes, it goes to zero, but it's curvilinear. And so what happens is when it does go to zero, then the poles reverse, north-south reverse. The field is regenerated and then starts to decay again. Now, that's a fairy tale, because let's look at the science of that. Now, everybody in the audience is pretty much aware of MRIs or MRTs, depending upon what country you're in. And magnetic resonance imaging works on people. We stick you inside a big electromagnet. We can visualize what you look like on the inside with the use of a computer and software program. And it's really great stuff. I mean, I've had about 6 or 7 myself. It's a whole lot better than cutting you open. But think about it. It works on the basis of magnetism. Now, if you take the current decay of the Earth's magnetic field, remember, it decays the same way a radioactive material decays. It's not straight line. So it decays with a half-life. Now, we know the half-life because we've measured it long enough. Remember that we've measured the Earth's magnetic field now for almost 200 years. And we know it has a half-life of 1,400 years. So if you go back in time, every 1,400 years, it's going to double. In the future, it's going to half. Now, if you go back 8 to 10,000 years, the strength of the Earth's magnetic field would be lethal. It would simply kill you. Every single cell in your body would be ripped to shreds. So that means, number one, humans cannot have been on the Earth even 8 to 10,000 years. So we didn't evolve from apes a million years ago. And let's think about this thing about reversal. Now, if the magnetic field goes to zero, we're all going to die, because the magnetic field of the Earth causes what's called the Van Allen radiation belts, but it is protecting us from the deadly radiation, primarily solar winds and some galactic radiation as well. But if we don't have it, we'll all be irradiated and die. So if you go forward a while, we're going to die. You go back more than 8 to 10,000 years, we'd be dead. We live in a very short window of time. Next question, second law of thermodynamics. If it went to zero, please tell me by what natural mechanism the field could be regenerated. That's where it's a fairy tale. There's nothing in nature that would rebuild the field. You know, that's asking again to get something from nothing. And so when we take a look at the particulars, the story might sound convincing to those that are not educated or not aware of the science. But to somebody who does know the science, it's an absolutely vacuous argument.
Well, that's a great detailed answer, Dr. Grady. George?
Okay, just based on what he said about the magnetic field going down to zero, I've read quite a few articles and papers where they suggest that the reversal occurs every. Get a load of this. It's not confirmed science, but they say between 300 and 700,000 years. Just for simplicity's sake, let's take it as 450,000 years, so we can actually do some quick math with a 4.5 billion year old Earth. If that reversal occurred at an average of 450,000 years, it means that those reversals have occurred 10,000 times in Earth's history. And remember what Dr. McMurtry said about they assume that it went down to zero and regenerated itself with 100% efficiency. Why do they say that? Because they know 10,000 reversals with some kind of loss in between would mean that the Earth would not have a magnetic field by now. So they have to postulate a reversal with 100% efficiency in the regeneration of the magnetic field. So I'll leave it at that. I won't go into the details, but I will later on when I explain a bit about the dynamo theory and the Barnes and the Humphreys models that show predictions. And Donnie, what do we say about the gold standard in science?
The gold standard of science is to make a hypothesis that leads to testable predictions. So
exactly, and we'll show you how that exact hypothesis occurred and how the predictions were actually proven to be correct.
Amen.
It's now, and this summarizes what the good doctor just said. Move it back a bit. Here on the y-axis, whoops, wrong hand. Here on the y-axis is the strength of the magnetic field. The x-axis is time. We have measurements, as he pointed out, from the last 200 years, which shows the decay of the Earth's magnetic field. I could have drawn that a bit better there. So it's decaying. And if you extrapolate back, you can get the age of the Earth's magnetic field to be around 10,000 years. Now, Dr. Tom Barnes, a longtime friend of ICR in the 1980s and 70s, actually did this calculation and wrote a paper on it back in the 1970s, 1980s. Tom Barnes was a man who was the dean of ICR's graduate school and hired me back in 1983. So I view him as a dear brother. Now, you notice the wiggly lines that I put here. This will tie into the idea that I'm going to talk about after the break and that George is going to talk about. And that's a current creationist theory that the fluctuation of the Earth's magnetic field occurred during the time of the Great Flood. So that's an overview, but we have to be clear about the physics of what's going on. Now, I hope you all don't mind going back with me to high school physics. And you'll recall that the world outside of America does focus around soccer balls. This may actually be a volleyball. It is. But at any rate, we'll pretend that it's the Earth. And as we pointed out in the past, the Earth has got the crust that we stand on, and then it's got the mantle and the core. Well, the mantle has parts, and the core has the outer core and the inner core. The argument for the Earth's magnetic field has been for many, many years is it's almost as if there is wire that runs equatorially and that there's an electric current flowing in this wire along the equator. Now, why would we even think that that would be true? Let's try not to strangle myself with my own wire here. The way that we think that that might be true, and I have to be very careful here because I borrowed from a friend in the community a powerful magnet. This little magnet here is actually pretty powerful. I'm not going to put it near my computer because I don't want to erase things. But I hope you can see that this magnet here will actually be attracted to, here's a block of iron that's used on my rock saw outside to direct the blade. And so as I bring the magnet close to this block of iron, look at that. It jumps over there, doesn't it? Look at that. Get it up here where you can see it against the white someplace. See, it jumps over there. So there's the magnet. And what do we know about magnets like this? Well, there are a number of things that we can point to. We know that many antique dealers love to carry something that's made of brass out when they're studying antiques, because if you bring a brass piece like this brass saxophone, there's no magnetic attraction. But if you bring something that might appear to be brass, can you see the kind of brassy color there, George? It appears to be brass, but it's not. What's this? See, it connects and is attracted to this magnet so well that I can barely pull the thing apart. Now, this kind of magnet here is what we want to focus on in the first part of our discussion. And let me use my cane here as an example of what we're talking about. If electricity is flowing in my cane from its handle to its base, if electricity is flowing in this direction, there is a principle from high school physics called the right-hand rule. So class, whether you're in Canada or America or the UK, hold up your right hand. Now, it's kind of screwy on a TV screen because my right hand might appear to be on the left-hand side, but it is my right hand. And so grasp the cane and put your thumb out. This is perhaps simpler to do. So we've got the Earth. We have an electric current flowing equatorially on the Earth. And by the right-hand rule that George and I have studied, and as an engineer, he's had electrical engineering, the magnetic field is in the direction of the thumb. That's what you studied all those years ago, right, George? The right-hand rule. So that's what we're talking about, the right-hand rule, the magnetic field. And so if you look at the Earth and you imagine, as we do imagine, that there is a electric current flowing along the equator, then the right-hand rule would say that there would be a magnetic north and a magnetic south. Now, in antiquity, people discovered what they call a lodestone, and they noticed that lodestone would attract and repel. And so if I can ever get my magnet off here, well, I might as well leave it there for right now. So here is my magnet, strongly attracted to this block of iron here. They noticed that if you had two of these magnets, as you went close, on that end it would attract, and then on the other end it would repel. Now, because I don't have two matching magnets this size, I can't really illustrate this for you, but I think that most of you have, in your elementary or second form, third form science, have seen that. Now, this idea of the Earth's magnetic field began to be researched by a variety of people. Here's one of the physics books that I taught from years ago. And this book has got quite a nice story in it about the Earth's magnetic field. And I love stories like this. This is Tippin's book, page 385. He says this: although the modern theory of magnetism holds that a magnetic field results from the motion of charges, science has not always accepted this proposition. Oh, what's the golden rule that we've heard about? You form a hypothesis, and you're like old Hans Ørsted in 1820. You go in the lab. Now, what's funny about this is Professor Ørsted should have done this in his office before he came into the classroom, because here's what happened. It's fairly easy to show that a powerful magnet exerts no force on a static charge. We'll save that for another time. In the course of a lecture demonstration, I really feel sorry for Brother Hans here. In 1820, Oersted set up an experiment to show his students that a moving charge and magnets do not interact. He was so convinced of this that he rigged up this little deal here. He had a battery and he put a wire up on a board. You could do this probably in your garage, but notice what happened. So he was going to show the students that there'd be no interaction. So when he placed the magnetic needle, here is one of my geology compasses, and there you can see the needle in there. When old Oersted placed the magnetic needle of a compass near the conductor, to his surprise, when the current went through the wire, a twisting force was exerted on the compass. Oh boy, was he embarrassed, until it pointed almost perpendicular to the wire. Further, the magnitude of the force depended upon the relative orientation of the compass needle and the current. Evidently, a magnetic field is set up by a charge in motion. So the argument by geophysicists back in the early 1900s, the argument has been, okay, we've got a magnetic field in the iron-rich core, outer core, that's moving equatorially, and it produces a magnetic field to the north. Well, once they began to make these observations, in the last 200 years, this would take us back to about 1800, 1820, when Oersted was doing this, they began to make measurements of the strength of the field. And in doing so, they had one of those eureka moments in science where they measured it each year in preparation for some conference. And over the last 200 years, I ought to put this in red, where we actually have measurements, data has been gathered. During this 200-year period, the Earth's magnetic field has clearly diminished in strength. Standard mathematics that George is going to tell us about in a few minutes allows you to do what's called extrapolation. So you take these data points and you take them back in time, and you get the maximum strength of the Earth's magnetic field around 10,000 years ago. You can easily make that exactly match Bishop Ussher's 4004 BC, but in Tom Barnes' work, he put in a fudge factor and let it go all the way back to 10,000 years. This has been used by Dr. Henry Morris in the 1950s and 60s, and by others. It's been used to argue that the Earth is thousands of years old. It cannot be millions and billions. George, what do you think of that introduction there, my friend? Are you there, George?
Yes, very good, David. I was just going to add to that, but I need Donnie to share my screen.
Yes, I'm done with my 20 minutes here. Let's see how close we are to the top of the hour. So we're at 6:40. So, George, you go for as long as you want to, and then we'll take some questions. Donnie, do we already have some in the feed?
Good question, David. So anybody who's got any questions pertaining to the topic, or even just questions that have been on your mind pertaining to the flood, uniformitarianism, actualism, whatever it is, maybe some objections you've heard from the critics, tag me and we'll make sure we get to those.
Thank you. George, take it away. Robin in the Batcave.
No worries. Can you see that? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Now, I'm not sure how physics we need to go into, but you may hear some terms like dipole, quadrupole, and octopole. they really relate to the north-south type directions you see in magnets. And the Earth has got all those, by the way, but keep in mind, 90% of the energy in the magnetic field is considered a dipole. Now, you'll see this diagram here of the Earth where it has your two poles. You've got a geographic north pole and a north magnetic pole, which is around 11.5 degrees offset, and the Earth spins around that axis. Now, please note, those curvilinear magnetic fields are ideal, but in fact, what really happens is this. Because of the cosmic rays from the sun, the rear of the Earth's magnetic field actually ends up like a tail. So if you can imagine going to the right, you'll see a tail where the cosmic rays actually drag the magnetic field towards the back. Okay, look, I think we talked about, or at least Dr. McMurtry talked about the rescue device that the secular scientists have come up with, the magnetic field being the magnetic field decay being a straight line. Well, that goes against physics, to be honest, and I'll tell you why. Everything in the all Earth, they do have a rescue device, as I said. They claim that the magnetic field does not decay exponentially, and I'll show you why that's wrong. You'll recall, as I said, Dr. McMurtry said, please understand that an exponential decay is a physical law proven by many experiments over time by many scientists, and it is used to calculate the use of electricity in everything electrical, from your cell phone to adding new megawatt power lines in the electrical grid. A linear decay might look good on paper, but get a load of this, it's physically absurd when dealing with the real world of electric circuits. In fact, linear decays are rare in nature in general, and conversely, exponential decay is firmly rooted in an electromagnetic theory. So it's not something the creation scientists have come. It's a physical law. So how could there be an electric current inside the Earth without a source? We'll explain to you how the Barnes-Humphreys model actually proves how that could happen, whereas the secular scientists have got no idea whatsoever. They've got lots of hypotheses that don't stand up to scrutiny. I mean, the great creationist physicist Michael Faraday answered the question of the electrical current back in 1831 with his discovery that a changing magnetic field induces an electric voltage. This is the basis of electrical generators, guys. So we have a decaying current producing a decaying field which generates a decaying current. If the circuit dimensions are large enough, the current would take a while to die out. The decay rate can be accurately calculated and is always exponential. The electrical energy doesn't disappear, it is turned into heat, a process discovered by creationist physicist James Joule in 1840. So when the secular scientists say that the reversals regenerate the field back to 100% efficiency, that is plainly incorrect. That goes against physics. That goes against physics. Now, I've got a lot of stuff that I can present to you, but there were, let's see, there are some measurements that were actually taken by the European Space Agency. They do this via 3 satellites that they have, and you'll notice that area between Africa and South America, I think it's called the South Atlantic anomaly. You notice that's a weak area of the magnetic field, but what they found was that over time, the magnetic field actually moves around a bit. So you can see that area in between Africa and South America is slightly yellow with an orange dot. It's still weak, but they can't explain that particular anomaly there. Just some other little trivia. Earth loses around 90 metric tons of its atmosphere every day. So people might get worried because of that, but please note, there's literally 5 to the 10 to the 15th power metric tons of gas in our atmosphere. So it would take a very, very long time for our atmosphere to be lost due to the cosmic rays. Okay, stop sharing. Now, now these European Space Agency things, they were launched back in November 2013 with the ultimate aim to measure the magnetic field, as I said. Now, based on the data from the swarm, as I said, the top image that I showed you first showed the average strength of the Earth's magnetic field at the surface measured in nanotesla. And everyone knows about Tesla, so I guess he's been given some credit there. The second image showed changes in the field over the same period. Though the colors in the second image, as you saw, are just as bright as the first, note that the greatest change were plus or minus 100 nanotesla in a field that reaches 60,000 nanotesla. So geophysicists have noted that the strength of the Earth's magnetic field has been decaying about 5% globally over the past century. However, it is not changing in the uniform way. It grows stronger in some places and weaker in others, as I showed you in those two images from the ESA. Here's something that comes straight out of the NASA website. It says the magnetic field changes in a chaotic manner, and we do not know why it changes in the way it does, nor how it will evolve in the future, said Olson. There is no periodic behavior and is therefore rather difficult, if not impossible, to predict how the magnetic field evolves over time. We can just observe how it has changed in the past and what it looks like today. So all the things that secular science says about the magnetic field is based on hypotheses, not on actual data, whereas I'll show you later on with the Barnes Humphreys model, it is based on measured data, and believe it or not, Dr. Humphreys has actually prepared a theory which he actually got the idea from the Bible, and I'll explain that in a moment. But generally, there are two models that are in place. There's the secular model, and the secular model is called the dynamo model. If you can imagine a lava lamp, I'm not sure if you guys know what a lava lamp is, but there's a hot liquid that sort of bubbles, it rises through a liquid in a lamp, and generally what they say is the in the core you have hot liquid, the metal liquid that is rising to the surface. So hot rises, cold goes down. So what happens is with that movement, they propose that there's an electric current involved in it. So that, and coupled with the Earth's rotation, these pockets of hot material are thought, get a load of this, are thought, they can't prove it, are thought to become electrical currents that give rise to the Earth's magnetic field. The precise mechanisms of the dynamo model, as I said, is still hotly debated. There are so many hypotheses out there. It's funny. Not one can prove their model correct one way or the other. And please note, we have never witnessed a reversal in recorded history. None. We have never witnessed it.
That's true. Very good point.
Yeah. As a final point, if the decay really were linear, and if you go back back in time, if the decay were linear, we wouldn't have much time left because the Earth's magnetic field will probably disappear in the next, I haven't done the maths on this, probably 5,000-10,000 years. So they're really, as I said, 10,000 reversals in a 4.5 billion year old Earth is ridiculous. Where they say that it regenerates at 100% efficiency, clearly impossible. It goes against the physics that we know, and has been demonstrated by numerous scientists over the years. So just so I can show you some information here where they've actually done the various. Just bear with me while I find it, and I'll share that. Oh, here we are.
Well, George, we're coming up on the top of the hour. Can we take a couple of questions, and then during my break,
right. Fine.
You all can talk about that if you don't mind.
Yeah. I've got so much information here. I don't know which one to present, but yeah, go on.
George and I both have used this equipment. You probably recognize this from the old days. This is a Simpson volt ohm meter that you probably used in your college days. The argument is quite a good one, that there is a current moving equatorially. Now, as George has pointed out, this is called in physics books the dynamo theory. And so I hope you see a little contrast here. I think Tom Barnes might be right, and we can give a bit of a defense to the dynamo theory. But let's go to your all's questions first, and then we'll come back to this after the 1 hour break.
All right, let's get to this question. And when we have the break, everybody in the chat, I know there's a couple arguments and objections that have been raised recently. I've actually got a page worth of notes, and I'm going to address that during the break. So we'll deal with that in probably about 15, 20 minutes. So let's get to this question, Professor McQueen. So here's the question. Okay. Apparently, there is just way too much biomass, coal, oil, and so on today in the Earth today for a young Earth creation model to account for. Critics say deep time and uniformitarianism or actualism best explains this. How do we respond, Brother McQueen?
Okay. Let me get a fresh sheet of paper here and my marker. And let's go to the blackboard on this. Those of you that have been watching George and I teach for the last 3 months will recognize this question has come up before. But we don't mind it coming up every month because it's a very important argument to counter. And so you may remember from high school math that a sigma symbol like this is to sum up something. And so we're going to take the amount of oil, the amount of natural gas, the amount of coal, and we're going to add up what would be called the biomass of that. And so we're going to come up with a number. The evolutionary community, and I'm going to just pick a number. I don't know what the real number is, but I'll pick a number, 10,000 tons. Metric tons, English tons, it doesn't matter. So we come up with 10,000 tons of this. And so the evolutionary community argues, oh, come on, McQueen. You young Earth guys, especially those of you that claim to be economic geologists, you're nuts. How could you ever get 10,000 tons of oil, natural gas, and coal in the Earth's crust in just 6,000 years? What are they missing, class? You should know by now what they're missing. Let me write it down. What they're missing is the time of the Great Flood, and they're missing the concept of catastrophe. I haven't done a good job so far tonight to get out the Bible and point out what it says about these things. After the 1 hour break, we're going to reread Genesis chapter 5, parts of it, to argue for a young earth. But for now, let's go to 2 Peter chapter 3. Very important passage that we need to understand in the context of answering this biomass question. If you want to follow along, it's 2 Peter 3, beginning with verse 3. First of all, you must understand that in the last days, scoffers will come. They will say, where is this coming he promised? Ever since our fathers died, now listen to this, ever since our fathers died, everything goes on as it has since the beginning of creation. Now, in geology class, what is that called?
Uniformitarianism.
Uniformitarianism. And it's an assumption that has been brought down over the years. And notice as I read on, it says, but they deliberately forget. Deliberately forget? You mean there's a spiritual side to this? You mean there's something about a creator that the evolutionary community doesn't want to bow down to? Oh, we can explore that again another time. They deliberately forget that long ago, by God's word, the heavens existed and the earth was formed out of water and by water. By these waters also, the world of that time was deluged and destroyed. I'm reading from the NIV version of the Bible. That word deluge that's used there is a very important Greek word. It's the word from which we get the word cataclysmos or cataclysm. It was absolutely destructive. Now, keep in mind that the flood didn't occur 2 weeks after creation. There was a tremendous amount of time, plenty of time for lush vegetation to grow on the earth. As we spoke 2 weeks ago about my theory of the chemistry of porphyrins be equally tied with chlorophyll and hemoglobin. So there's a lot of biomass around when God decides to destroy the earth. Let's forget for the moment, put to one side, plants. Dr. Henry Morris estimated that there might have been 1 billion people, that's 1 billion with a B, alive at the beginning of the flood. Another scientist named, his pen name is John Woodmoraphy, his actual name is Jan Petschkus. He redid the calculation, came up with 100 million. Well, if it's 100 million or 1 billion, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people to be buried deep in sedimentary basins. It's a tremendous catastrophic event. So from the standpoint of young earth catastrophism, when you add the plants to the animals, there is abundant biomass to explain, let me get my chart out again, the 10,000 tons in my example. Did you find that helpful, Donnie?
Fantastic. Very detailed response, Professor McQueen. I just find it funny that, excuse me, that's one of the arguments that the critics constantly put forth as an unanswerable challenge to young earth creationists. And as we can see here, it's easily and readily answered. So great job.
Now, let me correct you on one point there. My fearless leader and Alfred in the back cave. You've got your black on. I've got my black on. You have to be careful of the word, McQueen, you're easily explaining this. Well, it turns out it's not easy at all. It would take a whole 2 hours for George and I to work through the actual math of okay, if there's one world continent and there's 100 million people and there's this many pine trees and this many snails and clams along the coast and this many horses walking around and dinosaurs, let's not forget them. It actually would take some time to do this math, and I would challenge some of our students. I had surgery last week, and so I'm clearly getting to be an old man. Next year I'll turn 70. So the day will come that Ms. McQueen will have her final insult, and one day her face will appear here, and she'll say, "Oh, David died a slow death. The baseball bat, item by item, I just broke him up." And so, you all need to pick up the baton and run in the race. What do you think, George?
Well, David, I mean, does anyone really know the size of the dry land mass before the flood? Because it would have been much, much greater than what we see today. Just because we see the continents today does not mean if we join them together that's what it was in the past.
That's a good point, George, because you got the erosion of that. So if we add up the number of square miles on today's continents and using the internet, you should be able to quickly get that number. That number's got to be a minimum, right, George? Not a maximum.
Yeah, and there's plenty of evidence to suggest that the vegetation in before the flood era was much gigantic, if you like, humongous. So there would have been a lot of ways that you could have got that biomass. That's not a valid question, but this one here by Bubblegum Gun.
Yes.
He says, how did the plant algae mass get miles underneath the earth? The flood's mudslide would have to be also miles high.
Yeah, see, as you have pointed out many times, the evolutionary community is excellent in shooting themselves in the foot. Now let's take his question apart. So he's saying you got all this biomass. How did it get so deep? Well, this is how it got so deep. The flood was a worldwide catastrophe. It is true that many of my fellow creationists have very carefully documented the mud flow, mudslide capability of the earth. But keep in mind that it's not only that. Let me get my soccer volleyball back here. Okay, here is the earth in the pre-flood world. And let's say that where that Franklin word and soft part there is the pre-flood world that's in the shape of the letter C. So it's one world continent. This gets hit and broken up. And what's it like today? Who has it memorized? We do have land today, but how much of the world is ocean when you look from space?
70%.
You have that number memorized, George? Is it 75% or something?
I think it's around 70%.
Yeah, I forget the number. So what we're saying is we had a worldwide aqueous catastrophe of a catastrophic nature. This is not the gentle flood of the Mesopotamian valley that many people portrayed in the old days. This is a catastrophic event that's been carried on by what now is called rapid plate tectonics or catastrophic plate tectonics. And so it's easy actually to imagine, and let me use my bat radio here and turn it on its side. And then here is Robin's bat radio that I always give him to him at the last minute, but he's bad about losing things. So this is Robin's bat radio. Let's imagine the bottom one to be a mass of organic material the size of North America, the size of Australia. I'm talking about a huge amount of miles deep sediment. I'm sorry, a biomass. And then over the top of it, we have the actual erosion of sand, silt, and clay burying this deep in basins. When it gets deep in basins, what happens? That becomes a source rock, as we talked last week. It then migrates, that source rock does, it migrates into what are called reservoirs and is trapped for use today. I think that calculation can be done by one of the students, and they can email it to Standing for Truth. The calculation for the amount of vegetation, the amount of the area of the Earth's surface today, and then we add more to it. Does that make sense, George?
Yeah. I forget now whether it was ICR or CMI. I read an article in one of those sites, or it could have been Answers in Genesis, I'm not sure, but one of the creation scientists actually had done those calculations and proven that there's no problem with the biomass issue.
But notice what George just said, and it's a very important lesson for those of you that are going to remain our students through Christmas. Now, keep in mind that many of you will receive a junior geologist certificate, and it may be a badge, actually, that you can wear to work and stuff, a junior geologist badge. If you do your research and get a copy of my book, get a copy of Dr. Andrew Snelling's truly remarkable 2-volume set called The Earth's Catastrophic Past. If you do your research, you'll be able to see the truth of what George just said. You know, there are a number of us working on this. They're Standing for Truth. There's the Institute for Creation Research that I was part of from 1983 to 1987, 4 years. There is Ken Ham's ministry in Kentucky, Answers in Genesis. And there are a number of others. Is one called CMI, as I recall, George?
Yep.
And so there are a number of us working on this. If we're looking for the truth, and if we want to stand for truth, is it any surprise at all that a number of us from a number of different angles are coming up with the same number? Isn't that how science should work, Donnie?
Exactly right, brother. Exactly right. Well said. Well said. I want to give a shout out to everybody in the chat giving their support. Jerome says, thank you, SFT. Neff, I appreciate the support. He says Z-shaped coal seams verify the entire geologic column was created very rapidly.
I want to say hello to Nephilim Free. He's my buddy, partner in crime. We'll bring you into the Batcave one day. But for now, I would ask the leader of our group, SFT, to drop my video for the 1 hour break for me, and I'll turn it over to you guys.
All right, I appreciate it. And before I do, Doki Doki SFT Fan Club says bat signal for a brother at YEC.
So. I've got to answer the bat signal. Here we go. Flying out now on the bat plane.
Well-deserved break, Professor McQueen. So there we go, brother. We'll see you in 5 to 10 minutes. So I'm going to briefly go into, George, the prediction from Dr. Humphreys, but just briefly, because I know you're going to be touching on it in the second half of this discussion, right?
Yep, I certainly will. I'm ready for it if you want to go there. But if you've got something else to say,
yeah, I was gonna address a pretty funny and unsophisticated argument that has been repeated recently, trying to say that, well, it's not even really a rebuttal to the overall decay of the magnetic field. It's just an attack on the fact that various creationists have different opinions on the data, right? They come to different conclusions on the data, which is how science works. Okay, nothing changes the fact that the magnetic field overall is losing energy, and it is essentially just withering away. Okay, so what I wanted to address are the two thoughts, I guess, dominating thoughts in the creationist world. And as you were talking about earlier, George, the gold standard of science is to make testable predictions, and to not just make them, but test them and confirm them, right? And young earth creationists, especially flood geologists, they have done just that numerous times. It's the young earth creationists that are actually meeting the gold standard of science. We find this in astronomy, geology. We find this in genetics, biology. Okay. And we've talked at great length, George, as you know, brother, about the cold slabs prediction, right? Based on the catastrophic plate tectonics model and runaway subduction. We've never had an actual rebuttal to that, nor have we had better predictions made by the critics, whether that be old earthers, theistic evolutionists, naturalistic evolutionists. But another prediction that I have personally used in past debates. Brother Neff and I had a 2 versus 2 debate on the flood. Must be going on over 2 years now. Time flies by. Neff might remember. On modern day debate between Snake was right and emotionally stunted. And we got into testable predictions. And I talked about the rapid magnetic reversals. So this has been known and discussed for years. And a lot of these critics, they're so out of date, out of touch with reality that they're not aware of this themselves, right? We oftentimes know more than the critics. Okay. So to briefly go into this prediction made by flood researchers and young earth creationists, specifically Dr. Russell Humphreys, pertaining to the rapid magnetic reversals. Well, we know that the Earth's magnetic field, right? We've discussed how the Earth's magnetic field draws our compass needle towards the north. Okay, but sometimes over the course of Earth's history, it draws it towards the south. And it actually turns out that we have data that seems to, at least it's been interpreted this way by many, seems to confirm that this happened just 4,500 years ago, roughly at the flood. Because what happened was old Earth researchers, they were looking at lava flows that would only take a couple of weeks in order to form, okay? They took measurements of the skin of the lava to see the magnetic orientation. What they were expecting to see and observe was almost no change, okay? No change at all as they went deeper into the hot lava, where the interior should shift only slightly, okay? What they found was the outside skin pointed north and the inside pointed south. Okay. Again, we have confirming evidence directly from lava flows, okay, which was predicted by Dr. Russell Humphreys, that the switch of magnetic field had to have and may have occurred rapidly. Okay. Now, during the flood, okay, if this data really does confirm that prediction, which I lean towards yes, that seems to be what it looks like. During the flood, then what we have are oscillations in the poles. Okay, but overall, George, and tell me if this makes sense, what we still have is a loss of energy and overall decay. Okay, the rapid reversal of the pole is, yes, it's what flood researchers predicted. Given the catastrophic nature of the flood, it makes sense that this could have occurred, and the data seems to confirm that prediction. This goes back to the gold standard of science. Flood researchers, young earth creationists, excuse me, they're making these future testable predictions and they're being confirmed. Okay, now, that being said, some creationists point out that what they've actually discovered are just areas of stronger and weaker magnetism. In some places it's stronger, and in some places it's weaker. And they will point out that reversals have never happened, but we have areas of stronger magnetism and other areas of weaker magnetism. There's kind of in-house debate, in-house discussion going on. But whether or not, okay, there were rapid magnetic reversals at the flood or not, the point is these oscillations, okay, if they occurred, we still have overall decay. And it brings me to genetic entropy. Tell me if this makes sense, George. Okay. Mutations are accumulating. Okay. Low impact deleterious mutations are accumulating from generation to generation. Now, the critics, they're so desperate that they want to say that, beneficial mutations can counterbalance the damage, they'll say, right? But here's the thing. Beneficial mutations are rare. They're about 1 in a million as per Lenski's experiment. And generally, your one rare beneficial mutation is still reductive. There's no counterbalance. It's like climbing up a mountain and taking, 1 step forward, but 10 steps backward. I mean, you're never going to get to the top of that mountain. And 1 or 2 rare beneficial mutations is never going to counterbalance the damage. And that's the same thing with the magnetic field. Overall, we have decay. Overall, we have loss. This limits the age of the Earth. This is very problematic for old Earth, the old Earth paradigm. And oscillations will not counterbalance the decay is the point. It's wishful thinking, okay? And it's just not going to help. It's not going to save the day. Now, if there are certain critics that have a problem with differing opinions, differing thoughts in terms of the data itself, well, that's very unsophisticated. That's very unintelligent. It's not actually dealing with the argument. It's not actually dealing with the data itself. Did all that make sense, George? And what are your thoughts, brother?
Yes, actually. Dr. Humphreys proposed a test for his model, and you mentioned the one about the lava rocks. His proposal was that the magnetic reversal should be found in rocks known to have cooled in days or weeks. And guess what? 3 years after his prediction, there were leading researchers, Robert Coe, and I think it was Michel. It's a French name. I think it's Prévost, something like that. They found a thin layer that must have cooled within 15 days, and get a lot of this. It had a 90 degree of a reversal recorded continuously in it, and it was no fluke. Wait, there's more, as they say. 8 years later, they reported an even faster reversal. This was staggering news to them and the rest of the evolutionary community, but strong support for Humphrey's model. Another prediction that came true. And Donnie, tell me, when something has a half-life, like in radioactive decay, we straight away assume that it's an exponential decay. But why is it in the magnetic field when the half-life, when we say there's a half-life of 1400 years, somehow with regards to the magnetic field, it's not an exponential decay, it's a straight line. You see where they have their cake and eat it too?
Yeah.
Like Dr. McMurtry stated, if we show a exponential decay curve and it disproves deep time, they revert to a straight line. If we have a straight line and it contradicts deep time, then they revert to an exponential decay. So it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous science. You can't have it both ways, guys. You can't.
No. Wishful thinking is exactly what it is. Hey, Professor McQueen, hope you enjoyed your break.
I did. I needed it. And let me go for my next 20 minutes here, and we'll now go to the next topic, and that is just what you all have been talking about.
Oh, I haven't had my 20 minutes.
Well, you get it after mine, don't you?
He's teasing ya, Brother McQueen.
Oh, he's teasing me. Okay.
Team tease.
I lack sensitivity. Okay. Let's go now as geologists to the field, and let's go to the mid-ocean ridge and collect some rocks. This is a migmatite that's been cut. It's an example of a metamorphic rock. I'm going to use it as an example for the basalts in the Mid-Ocean Ridge. Now, we want to advise you to put on your geology field hat and actually begin to get some books that will help you to understand. Here's my favorite secular geology textbook. It's been around a long time. Lee himself died at age 73 back in 1974. And I used this book in 1980 when I was teaching, and it's called Leet, Judson, and Kaufman. You can probably get this for $1 on Amazon. If you read what a standard geology text says about plate tectonics, you will find a rising enthusiasm, a rising excitement when they get to the mid-ocean ridge. I talk about some of the minerals associated with radioactive dating and so forth in my book. But if you go beyond my book to look at a map of the mid-ocean ridge, move my hand here, and let's go from New York to London here. And we fly across, and there's the mid-ocean ridge and Iceland. Now, why were they so excited about this? During World War II, submarines and ships transited the Atlantic from New York to Nova Scotia and across to Greenland, Iceland, and over to Europe. Well, during that time, they were making soundings of the ocean, and they noticed that there was a very prominent ridge in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And then as they went worldwide, they saw that there were other ridges on maps that George has shown us in the past that has been discovered in other oceans. Well, after World War II and in the 60s and 70s, we became sophisticated enough to be able to go down with some equipment and actually sample the mid-ocean ridge. Now, one of the places that I want to take Ms. McQueen to in the next 5 years is Iceland. Can you see on my map here? The mid-ocean ridge goes through the country of Iceland. There's a part of Iceland that you can drive your car to the east and stand on the European plate, and then you drive it, go around the island, go the other side, and you're on the other side of the mid-ocean ridge. You can collect the basaltic rocks that are there and then carry this out into the ocean. And Ms. McQueen, in her excellent research, found these quotes that this is from a NOAA, stands for National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. It's a unit of the U.S. government. We have friends that work for NOAA when we were living in the D.C. area. If you go to the website that Ms. McQueen found tonight, the NOAA website, and type in magnetic striping, magnetic reversals, this is what the website says. It says, scientists are still not sure how the field is generated. Very interesting. Though it's clearly related to the movement of molten iron in the liquid outer core. So I have, for the last 40 years, thought that the dynamo model can be rescued. You've got electricity flowing equatorially and the generation of a field perpendicular to it. But the website, the NOAA website, Ms. McQueen found, is even more puzzling why the field switches back and forth between normal, that's the north, and reversed south polarity. For those of you that have been praying for Ms. McQueen, I'll I'll interject something here. 50 days ago, she had open heart surgery, had a double bypass, and during the process of the surgery, they discovered that she had a ventricular aneurysm, took her heart out of her body, put her on a heart-lung machine, repaired that, and she was in the hospital for many days, but she's back home now recovering. Thank you for your prayers. She will be, she is predicted to be, I guess a way to put it, back to her normal self in early November, and she'll be joining me for a presentation we've been working on for several months, how the chemistry of Ms. McQueen's kitchen, which is to my right here, disproves evolution. So looking forward to that. So you've got this normal and reverse polarity. Now, one of my professors at the University of Michigan, Rob Vandervoo, who still lives as far as I know, was a world-renowned researcher on the Earth's magnetic field, the polarity. His students went all the way from Europe to America to South America studying these. And so it turns out if you go to the woods and you put your geology hat on, like I've got right here, and you very carefully, now this can't be done casually, it's got to be done very carefully. You go up to an outcropping in England or South America, and you find a group of rocks. You have to, in the field, very accurately determine what is north, and you got to mark it on your samples. Why? Because when you bring them back to the University of Michigan and actually do cores of them, what you discover is that there is a reverse polarity. There are some rocks that are pointing to the north and to the south. The argument that George gave during the break, the fact that you can go places where you find this reversal happening very quickly, is a telling argument about how during the time of the Great Flood, this would have happened. Now, further research helps you to understand this. If you look at the mid-ocean ridge and you look at these stripes of magnetism, they're not a constant shape. They vary. So that if the field remains constant, the polarity stripe widens. Why? Because during the events of the Great Flood, as the continents were moving apart and coming back together, the mid-ocean ridge was bringing up tremendous amounts of lava into the ocean floor. That lava, if it happened to start cooling during a time of reversal, you get a new polarity. Now, without going into all the physics, which George is going to introduce us to, if you actually go out and look at these areas of magnetic striping, what I've marked there in red, I'm going to get another color here. Let me get University of Tennessee orange here and make this a bit more clear. As you go up and down, that doesn't really, it's not orange, that's rose. Oh, well. As you go up and down the ridge, you have regions of basalt that are normal polarity. For the evolutionists in the community, we're trying to make this simple, so we'll try not to run out of crayons explaining this to you. You keep on going, and you go out, and you find another group of basalts, illustrated by this other color, that have a different magnetic reversal. I think what Donnie and George have already introduced you to is the best overall way to explain it within the model. And that is that during the time of the Great Flood, where I've got this wiggly line drawn here, there was rapid reversal of the Earth's magnetic field, which did imprint these basalts running up through Iceland, and also rocks on the continents. Before I turn it back over to George, I'll tell you what I find to be a lighthearted story about Iceland. One of my hobbies using Netflix is to watch detective movies in other languages. I even listen to the language of Australia. Sometimes it's hard to understand, George.
Yeah, David, I missed your explanation there. Can you please repeat it, especially the part where you said, "Now listen to this."
Okay. Is this a joke?
Yeah. No.
Okay. But let me go on with my lighthearted story. So, one of the most recent Netflix purchases is a multi-part series from Iceland called The Valhalla Murders. Now, parts of the show is pretty complicated and gruesome, but what I find interesting is I've had 4 years of German, and I try to listen to what they're saying in Icelandic, and so far the only words I can understand are internet, hi, and bye. The rest of it sounds like they're speaking some combination of Klingon and American Cherokee. I've never heard a language like this. So much for Iceland. We'll go back to you, George.
Okay. Donnie, can I share my screen, please?
You definitely can, brother.
I'm going to go into the details now of the Barnes and Humphreys model, and just explain it. Hopefully, without too much physics. But can you see that?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, remember I mentioned that there are numerous papers of measurements of the magnetic field. Well, they're just some of them. And you can see there it says I've stated that based on those measurements, they've determined that the field's energy has halved every 1465 years or so. Excuse me. As I mentioned earlier, a half-life, as in the case of radio metric dating or radioactive decay, indicates an exponential decay. So it's backed up by physics, it's backed up by data. So there's not much that they can actually say there and refute that it's not an exponential decay. I mean, even one of their own geophysicists, this one's geophysicist, his name's David Stevenson at the California Institute of Technology. He admits that there are problems that the Earth's magnetic field poses for the long age proponents. He actually states, and I quote, "Right at this moment, there is a problem with our understanding of Earth's core, and it's something that's emerged only over the last year or two. The problem is a serious one. We do not now understand how the Earth's magnetic field has lasted for billions of years. We know that the Earth has had a magnetic field for most of its history. We don't know how the Earth did it. We have less of an understanding now than we previously thought we had a decade ago of how the Earth's core has operated throughout history." That comes from a Discover magazine, July, August 2014. Now, if I can just go, I'll just cite that graph there while I explain the Humphreys model. Okay. Now, Dr. Humphreys actually used the Barnes model and expanded it, but what he did though, he actually used scripture, specifically several scriptures, but specifically 2 Peter 3 verse 5, which says that the earth was formed out of water and by water. So what does that mean? Well, Dr. Humphreys suggests that Water contains hydrogen atoms, okay? And the nucleus of the hydrogen atom is a tiny magnet. Now, normally these magnets cancel out, so water as a whole is almost non-magmatic. However, Dr. Humphrey proposed that he could have created water with nuclear magnets aligned, but immediately after the creation, they would form a more random arrangement, which would cause the Earth's magnetic field to decay. This would generate the current in the core, which would then decay according to the Barnes model. Now, apart from many reversals in the flood year, as Humphrey's model states, Dr. Humphreys, what he did was, if you look at that figure 2 on the right-hand side there, that's empirical measurements based on archaeomagnetic data. Okay, so what Dr. Humphreys did was he adjusted that data for the fact that we know that the magnetic field was stronger in the past, and based on that the carbon-14 would have been much less. So he's adjusted. So you'd note those measurements there on the left-hand side. They were quick reversals. And hello, look at the bottom axis there. It relates to around about 4,500 years ago. Hello, that was the flood. Now, based on that, you look at the figure 1. He's proposed that this is the history of the Earth's magnetic field, where at creation and after the fall, the magnetic field begins to decay, and then during the flood, it drops down. There were a number of reversals, as you can see from the archaeomagnetic data, and it fluctuated for a while, and then around about 2,000 years ago, corresponding to the arrival of Jesus, it picked up, and now after his death, it's begun to decay again. Now, why does Dr. Humphreys think that? Well, in his model, he says that many atomic nuclei spin and thereby generate tiny magnetic fields. There were so many spinning nuclei in the Earth at creation that it aligned their fields would have added to a large field of sufficient magnitude. So he's actually saying if each individual atom was aligned perfectly and those individual magnetic fields of each one of those atoms magnified, that would have been the generator for the magnetic field at creation. And what he's done is Dr. Humphreys actually has used that model based on not just the Earth, but also on other planets. He reasoned that the Earth and the planets all share a watery beginning. That's in accordance with Genesis 1 and 2, by the way. He calculated what the magnetic field strength would have been at creation by using a mass of aligned water molecules, as I explained, equal to the masses of each planet. Then what he did was he plotted the rate at which the magnetic fields would have diminished over the roughly 6,000 years since. So he wrote this, and I'm quoting him, says electrical resistance in a planet's core will decrease the electrical current causing the magnetic field, just as friction slows down a flywheel, end quote. Now, the resulting model accurately predicted the magnetic field strengths of Uranus and Neptune, as well as the declining strength of Mercury's field. Now, without going into really too much of it, there are numerous predictions that Dr. Humphrey had made, and I'll just touch on some of those, because as we stated earlier, the gold standard of science is to come up with a hypothesis and then prove that with testable predictions. So I'll just cite a couple of them, okay? So he claims that magnetic reversals should be found in rocks known to have cooled in days or weeks. As we mentioned earlier in those examples, secular scientists actually proved that was correct. So natural processes other than the Earth's magnetic field can produce the remnant magnetization observed in rock sediment samples. This was a report that titled, what was it titled? That's it. The correlation between the state of oxidation and magnetic polarity in metamorphic rocks from the Adirondack Mountains. It's a Cambridge University Press report. Now, secondly, the second prediction is the model for planetary magnetic field formation that was put by Dr. Humphreys had far proven to have more accurate predictive power concerning solar system magnetic fields than any put forward by secular community, including the dynamo model. We call it dynamo model, David. We don't call it dynamo.
Yes.
Dynamo model.
Okay.
So he successfully predicted a 4% decrease in Mercury's field strength during the time span between the Mariner 10, which was, I think, in 1974, and then the Messenger spacecraft readings around 2008 or thereabouts. Now, his creation model predictions was based on a 6,000-year age for the decay rates of Mercury and Earth's magnetic fields. Hello, the gold standard in science says that if you have testable predictions that are accurate, then what more do you want?
Yes.
None of the secular scientists with their dynamo model can come anywhere near that. I believe in one case, I think it was Neptune, but I could be wrong. I think the difference factor was about 100,000 between what Dr. Humphreys had calculated and what the secular model predicted. Now, even more importantly, I just mentioned. Oh no, actually, sorry, it was Uranus, not Neptune. Dr. Humphreys predicted that the field strength of Uranus was about 100,000 times the evolutionary prediction from their dynamo theory. That was verified. He also calculated, as I said, the field predictions of other planets. Things like I mentioned Uranus, Neptune had a strong field. Mars has a strong crystal magnetization. Mercury's field decays fast. He predicted 4% over 33 years. So, fellas, anyone who's listening, if you can't accept that, then I'm sorry. There's something wrong with you. I'll go as far as say you believe in pseudoscience. You don't believe in science, because science has shown that the creation model is far more accurate than the secular dynamo model.
And George, the point you made is very well taken. I would like to summarize in 5 minutes, and then I'm a bit weary from my surgery yesterday, so I'm going to leave the show a bit early. Is that okay with you, Donnie? I'll go ahead and summarize now and leave you and George to clean up the mess in the back cave.
Absolutely, brother. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I hope that you can see from the excellent research that George has done that here's a prediction made by Dr. Russ Humphreys that was made years before the technology was there to be able to find it out. There is a parallel in planetary geology. Many people that were studying the geology of the moon before they ever got actual samples back from the moon figured that the mineralogy and the chemistry would be about the same. But once the Apollo missions got all those rocks back, starting from 69 to the end of it in the 70s, it was discovered that the lunar rocks were extremely high in titanium. And I've always thought that the issue involved there is, let me send a note here to Donnie. The issues involved there show the value of the data that George has been talking about. Now, let's not miss the forest for the trees here. The modern creationist catastrophic model can explain the presence of these alternating magnetic fields as you move up to the country of Iceland. So we do have an explanation for that. But the critical part of this whole thing is the decay of the Earth's magnetic field. In the red here, where I've got my hand, in this area, that's 200 years of real data showing a half-life of the Earth's magnetic field at a little over 1,400 plus years. Well, all it takes is high school algebra to extrapolate that back, and you'll see that the Earth's magnetic field was charged, if you will, around 10,000 years ago. Now, we've touched on why that's important, or how you would even know that. Biblically, we believe that Adam and Eve and their descendants were alive and well from 4000 BC all the way up to present. And we know that they were alive and well, being protected by the Van Allen belt and being protected from excessive magnetic forces. So we know in the biophysics side of things how much of a magnetic field a human being can take before they get hurt. One of the arguments against going into space in the 60s was how would the astronauts survive going through the Van Allen belt? And we know that they did. Don't lose the point. The decay of the Earth's magnetic field is a remarkable, fairly easy way to explain argument for a young Earth. Now, I'd like to end my time with one of the stories I've learned about Bishop Ussher in my study of this dear man. You know, many of the evolutionary community will point to an essay he wrote in which he said, and I can't remember the exact date, but it was something like the Earth was created 4004 BC, the first week in October at 10 in the morning. Oh, the evolutionary community jumped all over this. You know, how stupid. How could he get that number? Well, they lack a sense of humor. Ussher was a university professor. I have been in my life a university professor several times. When does the world begin for you? It begins when classes begin. And so if you look at when the classes began at Ussher's University, it turns out that's where you get the date. It's the first week in October at around 10 in the morning. And so as a university professor, this is when the world began. Now, I think it's hilarious that the so serious evolutionary community can't take a joke. What do you think, George?
Yes, I'd like to add to that, David. In your graph, when you mention extrapolating backwards, yes, it's been shown, and this is why the secular camp don't want to admit to the exponential decay scenario. If you extrapolate back 10 to 20,000 years, you're talking about a magnetic field on Earth that would be over 200 times the strength of what we have today, and that would literally fry everyone, including the planet. So that's why they have to propose a straight line decay, not an exponential decay. And as I said earlier, based on electrical circuitry and what we know about magnetism, it does decay exponentially. So they're going against known physical laws when they propose that.
Now, all of you comic book fans know why I have to go. What is that light on the ceiling? That's the bat signal. I'm being called away to another crime scene. So we'll leave the evolutionary crime scene, and I will see you guys in 2 weeks. There's the bat signal. Good night.
Good night, David. Say hello to Shirley.
God bless you. Great show, and such a diligent superhero. You'd make the real Batman proud. So I appreciate it.
Oh, you're
David.
too kind.
God bless. God bless.
Donnie, I'd like to tackle that question there about can the magnetic field reverse enough to save deep time? Plainly no, and I'll explain why.
Yeah, let me, for the audience sake, let me give a little context. So, since some creationists, and I think there's good reason to do so, I have for years, this is nothing new. I like looking to testable predictions to show that young Earth creationists are the ones making them. The evolutionists are not. We have a strong model that gets stronger and stronger really every single day. So, if the data really does suggest, oscillations, rapid magnetic reversals at the flood, as predicted, not predicted by old earthers, not predicted by those that reject a global flood. Okay, and this is why these critics that use these unsophisticated arguments, they are what we call low-hanging fruit. They don't understand 99% of what we're saying, and they also don't understand, nor do they have their own model. Okay, so the question is, if this is really what we're seeing, and we interpret the data to suggest rapid magnetic reversals at the flood, can this then be extrapolated to save the day for the old earthers, to say that yes, there can then be a counterbalance to the overall trend, the overall decay? Let's put that one to bed. George, what are your thoughts, brother?
Well, as I stated earlier, 4.5 billion year old Earth, and their claim of reversals happening at an average of about 450,000 years, you would have 10,000 reversals in that period. Now, based on what we know about electricity, you can't have a reversal where the electrical current is reverted back to 100% efficiency. You get some losses. And literally, that's why they're proposing that, because they know that 10,000 reversals in a 4.5 billion year old Earth just doesn't work for them. So they have to propose a reversal where 100% efficiency occurs. And that's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. So, look, I've got some concluding remarks to make. Because what are we? 1 hour 45 minutes. So just so I can get through them. Look, I've prepared it. I'll just read my notes here. The Earth's magnetic field is not only a good navigational aid and a shield from space particles, it is powerful evidence against evolution and billions of years. The clear decay patterns show the Earth could not be older than about 10,000 years. Professor McQueen showed it, and I showed you graphs. And if you extrapolate backwards, as I said, there's no way that the Earth's magnetic field could be more than 10,000 years old. Dr. Barnes figured that out early on, and so did Dr. Humphreys. But as I said, secular scientists are full of rescue devices, and the straight line decay is that actual rescue device. So Dr. Humphreys actually puts it quite neatly, actually, and I'm going to quote him here. He states, at present, the only working theory for the origin, the fluctuations, rapid reversals, and decay of the field is a creationist theory, a theory that fits all the data. Thus, according to the best theory and data we have, the Earth's magnetic field certainly is less than 100,000 years old, very likely less than 10,000 years old, and fits in well with the face value biblical age of 6,000 years, end quote. Now, the best explanations for Earth's magnetic field are the ones that take all the observations into account. We showed you those. You can check it out yourself. Dr. Humphreys' hypothesis that the Earth's magnetic field went through multiple reversals during the flood year and has been decreasing ever since appears to be the best explanation we currently have. No one that I know of has produced anything that can make those testable predictions like the Humphreys model, the Barnes and Humphreys model can. So now with a creationist model, we are able to explain the origin of the Earth's magnetic field and predict using science how this model was used to determine the magnetic fields of other planets in our solar system. Whereas the secular model was out by a factor of 100,000, as I mentioned in the case of Uranus. This is a great achievement and testimony to the creation, not only to the creation scientists using the word of God to do science, but science in general. The Bible has been proven to be scientifically accurate again. We keep saying, yes, the Bible is not a science book, but it is scientifically accurate. And here's an example that proves that particular proposal that we actually state over and over again. Now, many will have you believe that creation is not scientific, but as we have shown, it's very much a science. You can't sort of go against what we've just said. We've used or at least Barnes and Humphreys used the scientific theory, again, developed by Sir Francis Bacon, a Christian. And without telling you how to suck eggs, you know what the scientific theory actually says. But going back to some verses from the Bible, in 1 Thessalonians 5:21, it says, "Prove all things, hold fast that which is good." In Proverbs 25:2, it says, "It is the glory of God to conceal a thing, but the honor of kings is to search out a matter." This is an example where two creation scientists, Barnes and Humphreys, actually did exactly that. The scientific method, people, has proven God's creation yet again. Thank you.
Well said, brother. Well said. 2 hours really flies by, but such an important topic. So detailed, so thorough. And we've looked at all the critics' responses. We've examined the critics' comments that have come in pertaining to the decay of Earth's magnetic field, and we have dealt with the criticisms, the arguments, the challenges. Now, is this going to stop the critics, the skeptics, from repeating the same arguments? No,
of course not.
We've seen that with the speciation arguments. We've seen that with the dating methods, which is why we just put out 2 marathons, dating method marathon, as well as the young Earth creation speciation model marathon. So definitely check those out. There's nothing that's going to save the day when it comes to the decaying Earth's magnetic field. So great stuff, great information. Anything else you want to get out there, George?
Yes, I just realized that there was a phys.org paper which I want to bring up, and I've spoken about lightning strikes before, but
actually, George, if I could, I just want to real quick. Sorry. I just want to remind people tomorrow, S.J. Thomason's going to be here, 4:30 EST. So 4:30, well, that would be my time, 3:30 Central. She's going to be giving a talk or a presentation on evidence for the resurrection. And then we're going to get the audience involved. We're going to have a Q&A pertaining to the topic. So make sure you are here for that. I'm pumped. I'm excited. So it's definitely going to be a must-watch show. Please bring your questions, bring your good questions for tomorrow. So looking forward to it. SJ, I appreciate it, you giving us your time. So George, I apologize. Back to you, brother.
Oh, no problems. You can interrupt me as many times as you like.
Oh boy, that's why we pay you the big bucks.
Well, that's right. It just extends the time, and that means more bucks for me.
There you go. We pay you hourly, right? So
I can buy more pizza. Anyway, this phys.org paper is about lightning, and it goes towards an argument that I've used before about lightning forming fulgurites, but this is not about fulgurites. It's about lightning. So this is an excerpt from that phys.org paper. And I'll quote it. It says, "The energy of the lightning hitting the land's surface can, for a short time, partially melt the rock. And when the rock cools down again, it takes on the magnetic imprint of today's magnetic field. not the magnetic field of millions of years ago when the rock was originally formed, says Knight. You get where I'm going with this? They look at specific rocks and look at the magnetic direction of the rock and make assumptions about reversals, etc., and the strength. But further to that, in a previous stream, I actually talked about fulgurites. There's a Nature paper that actually says global flash rates. This is lightning strikes of about 45 times per second occur on the majority, that is between 75 to 90% of the continental landmass. So if you do the maths there, Donnie, you get 1.42 billion strikes per year that's impacted by these lightning strikes on the dry land continent. And now, keep in mind, if this is hitting rocks and soil or whatever, the rocks would be displaying a change in magnetic field direction. And when you compare it to the Earth's land surface area of 148 million square kilometers, that adds another sort of argument to the point where they say we find so many rocks with change in direction in magnetic fields. I mean, how do they know that it's not lightning that's done it? And I've actually spoken about fulgurites. I mean, in an old Earth scenario, I think I calculated based on those numbers from Nature magazine, the Nature paper, we should be finding something like 7,400 fulgurites per square meter on the dry landmass. And not only that, I mean, okay, you could say, oh, but erosion could have eroded them. Fair enough. How come we don't find any evidence of erosion of subsequent layers below the top layer? We should be finding fulgurites in those layers because there's no evidence of erosion there. So that's another bit of evidence that sort of kills deep time. The fact that we don't find the number of fulgurites that we should, not only in the top layer, but also in subsequent layers below that. And on that, I'll end my presentation. There was a lot of other stuff, but we're getting on to 2 hours now. So,
isn't it amazing as to how one line of evidence, right, for young Earth creation and against old Earth creation, and the same thing goes for the lines of evidence against evolution and for separate ancestry. We can talk for 2 hours nonstop, dealing with the data, showing the data, and yet still it's not enough time. You know, the evidence is strong on our side. So much great information, George. And we could do that really with any line of evidence for our model. What I found funny is we put out a video last week, maybe a couple weeks ago, who knows, time flies by, on radiocarbon. I think it was about a 30-minute video. The first 3 minutes, we were laying down the foundation of the video, showing, yes, there's many lines of evidence that demonstrate, excuse me, that demonstrate a young Earth. And just real quickly went over a couple, right? Comets, decaying Earth, the Earth's magnetic field, the fact that it's decaying, losing energy. Touched on that for a few minutes and then got into radiocarbon, where we left no stone unturned, destroyed, yet no rebuttal to it yet, no response to radiocarbon, C14 in samples supposedly millions to billions of years old. We dealt with all the best talking points, all the favorite arguments, contamination, nearby material apparently recharging the C14, you name it. We dealt with it. We showed the evidence, showed the papers, showed the data. And the only 1 or 2 responses we did get was one specific low-hanging fruit just attempted to make a couple comments on the first couple minutes of the magnetic field, which wasn't even the main topic of the debate. So he essentially did a hit and run. which is why today we spent 2 hours on the Earth's magnetic field, showing that there's no rescue for the naturalist. There's no rescue for the old earther. But I just find it funny that the critics will oftentimes take a video, dodge 99.9% of it, address what they think is addressing, 0.1% of said video, and then claim victory. I mean, what are we dealing with here, George? It's laughable. It's getting kind of sad. The lack of sophistication in the arguments and rebuttals. George, what do you think, brother?
Yeah, well, I've been researching this topic for the last 11, 12 years now, and found exactly the same thing. It doesn't matter how many times you refute them, they'll come back with the same arguments again. But Donnie, just to brighten up your day with a couple of jokes, okay? Remember last time we spoke about what not to say to a police officer? Well, I've got 3 more for you. Okay, so you get pulled over, and please don't say this. He says, "Hey, you must have been doing 125 miles per hour to keep up with me. Good job."
I'm going to use that one.
The next one is, I thought you had to be a relatively good physical condition to be a police officer. Oops, don't go there.
That's an automatic ticket right there, brother.
Oh yeah, definitely. And here's I'll leave it at this with the last one here. I was going to be a cop, he says, but I decided to finish high school instead.
What I want to do today, George, is compile all of your jokes into a Team Standing for Truth jokes handbook.
Oh, so. I've got him. I actually, from the very first day I began my career, because people used to send those jokes, I collected them, I put them in a Word document, and I've been updating it ever since.
I like it, brother.
Yeah.
Couple questions real quick before we shut it down, George. Sandy C says, what's the Praise versus Jill debate about? So to get the exact title, let me pull it up here. So tomorrow we got we're trying to catch up on a lot of our shows that have had to be rescheduled. So tomorrow we've got 2 shows. Amazing Evidence for the Resurrection with S.J. Thomason at 4:30. And is unconditional election biblical? It's a debate between Praise and Jill. That's going to be at 9. And then Saturday, I'll be debating Crimson Air, unless I have a relapse of this virus. Hopefully not. So as of now, scheduled, me and Crimson Air or Merit, we're going to be debating soteriology. Can a believer lose his or her salvation? And then on Sunday, we're going to have Skyo versus Neff, Age of the Earth debate, young or old. Tuesday is, as scheduled, the big debate between Matt Slick and Dr. Shabir Ali. I also booked a couple more creation evolution debates. Kent will be debating Leo Phileas on Big Bang cosmology versus biblical cosmology. That's going to be probably in a few weeks, it looks like, as well as the epic round 3 between Kent Hovind and Snake Was Right, this time on the Age of the Earth. So tons of fun, tons of debates to look forward to. So I hope that answered your question, Sandy. And last thing, Redefine Living, I appreciate the support, brother. Thank you for the super sticker. And Sam Jenkins, good to see you as well. The Creation Conversations are awesome. Go subscribe, everybody, please, to the Creation Research YouTube channel, and check out their new podcast that Sam worked hours and hours, put a lot of work into their podcast, where you can find all of their shows.
And Sam likes my jokes.
Yes, he pretends to like your jokes.
Pretends. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so definitely go. And of course, Doki Doki is on it. Thank you, brother. Creation Conversations tomorrow here. So Before we let you go, George, any final words? I was going to go over a couple updates on the website, but I know it's been over 2 hours. You're probably tired. You probably got a dog to walk. So, any final words, or we'll let you go?
Yeah, I was going to add that I was having Nephilim-free withdrawal symptoms, but you mentioned that Neph was going to come back and do a debate. I love listening to Neph. I hope we have him more often, but maybe people aren't prepared to debate him because he's so good.
We've got, well, he'll be here Sunday, and then we're kind of in talks to hopefully get another couple debates with Brother Neff. He's great at demolishing the evolutionists, the naturalists. Cheryl, thank you so much for the support and super sticker. The Synagogue, good to see you. CJ and I are talking behind the scenes. We're going to be doing a collaboration soon. We've got so much. There's just not enough time in the day to do everything that we want to do. So hopefully we're going to finally start our collaboration soon. In the next few weeks, maybe. We're going to be going through, it's probably going to be a 3-part series, maybe. We're going to be going through Inspiring Philosophies video, supposedly dealing with young Earth creation. CJ and I are going to kind of dissect and examine his video in a collaboration type series. So, George, any final words, brother? We'll let you go. You definitely earned your paycheck with this one.
Just a bit of an explanation, actually. Most people in the chat probably don't know. I actually speak 3 languages. A lot of times when I stop and think a bit, it's because my brain goes through 3 vocabularies and it's trying to pick the right word in the right language. So I'm sorry about that.
What languages do you speak, George?
I speak English, Australian, and American. No. I speak English. I speak English, Greek, and Macedonian.
There you go, brother. There you go. Two more languages than I speak. So you're more evolved.
Yeah.
So, anyways, George, God bless you, man. Great show. Looking forward to what you and Professor McQueen got for us in hopefully 2 weeks from now. To the audience, please share this around. It's important. If you hear the skeptics or the critics bringing up the same typical arguments pertaining to Earth's magnetic field, shoot them this stream. Challenge them to refute it, debunk it, and give their own better testable predictions, which they will.
I'll give the people three dietary pointers. Okay, vitamin D. That's why I take my dog for a walk twice a day. Get your vitamin C. I eat an orange and a kiwi fruit every day. And the most important one is zinc. Zinc is very important for your immune system. Meat is full of zinc. Many nuts contain zinc. So make sure you get those 3 things into yourself, okay? Vitamin D, vitamin C, and zinc. Okay,
Amen,
that's it.
Brother. I've been living off of zinc.
Yeah.
So every day I've been taking, trying to kick this virus. I've been taking a ton of zinc, oregano, vitamin C, vitamin D. I mean, all the goodies. Lots of garlic soup.
Yeah, garlic. That's another one. Garlic's good.
Yeah, there you go. Garlic soup. Just don't go outside after having a bowl of garlic soup. Scare everybody away. Although everyone's wearing masks these days, so you're not going to smell you anyways.
Well, if everyone eats it, you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, there you go. Right, because then it's just the norm. Sam says, if you do fall ill, remember honey is the best medicine. That's another thing.
That's true.
I've been going through honey like crazy. I'm addicted. Somebody asked which books I had on the bookshelf. You can check our website and go to the book section. Go to our official website, and then just below you'll find top selling books. If you click it, it'll take you to our shop. And you can find all our books there, but a few of the books I have up on the shelf, the Independent Origins Handbook. This one I highly recommend. This one I've passed around a lot in like in my personal life to friends and family, because it's a kind of a more basic breakdown, less technical breakdown of the independent origins model. But of course, the critics always have their arguments, their rescue devices. So these two books, this one's Special Creation, a lot of citations in these two. This is the first couple, Refuting the Critics. So these two books we put together. These are very technical rebuttals to all the possible arguments and counters that the critics could put forth. So you can kind of get the best of both worlds, right? You can get the handbook for more of the basic breakdown, and you can also get the books that contain all your technical breakdowns. There's a lot of citations from young Earth creationists, technical papers in there, where it's kind of all just in one place. So it seems like people go ahead, George.
And get the Kindle version. That way you can actually copy and paste relevant bits and pieces that you like as arguments for any debates you have with anti-creationists.
Amen, brother. Well said. Well said. I'll so here's the website. We have, because of your amazing support and generosity, guys, we also do have a our own personal web designer, which is great because we're constantly updating this. I give the web designer a breakdown every week for the most part in document form, and then he spends a few days updating it. So if you go to our website, like for example, here, answering common questions, refuting arguments, we've added some more questions to the to this section for people to check out. Is the New Testament reliable? Is God morally right and morally wrong? Is junk DNA evidence for evolution? Nested hierarchies, radiometric dating? So we try to hit every possible angle. Here's where you can check out some of the books that I just mentioned, but we've got other books as well. Debunking Iron Raw, the Young Earth Creation Model. So definitely check this out for all your updates, and let me know too, because we're constantly adding categories, new categories that come to mind for me. For example, Christian apologetics. I've added a few more answers to common questions here. S.J. Thomason and SJ's going to be here tomorrow. Is the DNA code good evidence for God? Can naturalists explain the existence of life? Is there evidence for the Christian God? So as you can tell, we've got a ton of categories already. You know, there's dozens and dozens of videos and answers in each category. You know, we've done our best to hopefully answer any and all questions, challenges, arguments. And the last thing I wanted to point out is our new book, which we're getting great feedback for, which is awesome. I like to hear that. The Genesis Flood, Global or Local. Highly comprehensive, very thorough, addressing pretty well everything. You know, we spent a lot of time, especially Matt, you know, there was a lot of time spent looking at the other side, looking at the local flood model, and pretty well dealing with all their arguments, and then showing why our model is even more superior. That's why we gave a subtitle, Biblical Paradise is Found. And the evidence for that, it really is fascinating. We haven't seen any counter to it. We haven't seen any rebuttal, really, which is you know, not a surprise to me. So check the website. You know, moral of the story, check it weekly for updates as we upload and add more material and content for you guys.
Donnie, just as a final one, just let everybody know that our friend John Maddox has got an after show.
Yes.
I believe straight after this. So his after shows are epic, by the way. Sometimes I haven't got time to watch them, but I watch them later in the night, and they're fantastic.
Amen. Amen. John, thanks for the support. He says, after show plus atheism versus theism, open discussion. It looks like it's kicking off in well, let's see, it's 9:30 my time, so 9:30 CT. So I think we got, what, an hour? Look for link in side chat. Yeah, we're going to call it quits here. We've been going for 2 hours and 15 minutes. Guys, thanks for the great lively chat. It's been tons of fun. Thanks for the questions. Head over to John's channel. He's been having some awesome open mics. Last week, it was really hard for me because I couldn't join because I literally had no voice at all. So, but I've been listening, and John is putting on some awesome must-watch open mics. So please go check him out after this. George, any final words, my good man?
Well, I hope you're not paying your web designer more than me, because I'd be very disappointed.
Nobody gets paid more than you, George.
That's it, yeah.
You're constantly working overtime, so.
Good on you, Donnie. Good to see you back healthy.
I wouldn't say completely healthy, but getting there. So I appreciate everyone's prayers. I appreciate your kind words. George, great show. You and Professor McQueen really are a blessing, a wealth of knowledge, and amazing researchers. So God bless you, George. God bless everybody in the audience. Please share around this content. And we'll see you over on John, the man with the plan himself, John Maddox. We'll see you over on his after show. God bless.
God bless. Yes, sir.